Collection action for patient billing letters. What that means is that if you send any collection letter out through the patient billing wizard, now remember, and you'll watch the training video on this later, that any collection letter you send out through the patient billing wizard goes electronically. AdvancedMD is going to charge you for that. If you don't want to send it through the patient billing wizard, you can always use the collection module and in there drop it to paper. You don't have to use the patient billing wizard, but if you do, you're going to be charged for it. So keep that in mind first. Secondly, if you're okay with being charged for any collection letter that goes electronically through there, once it goes electronically through it, automatically in the collection module, an action is going to be set here, and it's going to be sent to collections. That's one less thing that the collector has to type in once he sends out a collection letter. He doesn't have to type in sent to collections. It's automatically put in as an action. So later when anybody else is reviewing the account, they can see, oh, this was sent to collections here. Here's the action. And again, you can delete this and click on the ellipsis button and scroll through here. If you don't find anything, you can always click Add New and add your own. I'm going to double click on Sent to Collections. Hold patient billing for promised payment. What that means is when the collector is working in the collection module, and again this assumes that you purchased that module, and they get a promised payment from a patient of $50, then what they can do is they can hold the patient billing until they actually get the $50. In other words, they won't keep getting statement. So if you choose yes, this is how it's going to work. Now you probably haven't covered the collections module, but let me give you an overview or an idea. So I'm going to click on the collection module button here. And I have one patient that is tied to Aetna that's 60 plus days. Again, you'll watch the training video on this, but I'm going to double click on that to open up their account so I can start working the patient's name on, or the responsible party, Jeff Crane. Down at the bottom, just like the patient demographics, you have the charges page, the actions, the letters, action history. Well, we're looking at the actions here, and what you have to do when a collector is making a promised payment is that whatever action they're performing, like calling the patient and the notes, they have to have a next action, maybe a follow-up call, and a follow-up date and a promised payment amount of, let's say, $20 or $50, and be sure to save it. If you don't have a promised payment or a follow-up and a next action, this feature won't work. Now what it does and how it prevents bills from going out, once you set this up here and you save it for this patient, Jeff Crane, I'm going to close out, and go to the patient demographics. On the responsible party tab, they have a hold patient billing, and you can see you can set it up here manually by yourself. You don't even have to be in the collections module. You can just say hold indefinitely by selecting the option, or hold until a certain date, and then when that date hits, it'll start generating the statements again. So tying this all together, if you are in the system defaults and you say yes, hold patient billing for promised payment, it's saying in the collection module, whatever the collector's doing, if he gets a promised payment with those fields I just showed you, it'll automatically come over here and update this until field. So the patient won't get any statements until the promised date. That's going to be pulling from the collections module, and it will pull in here to whatever that promised date is. And then after that date, of course, whether the collector gets the money or not, the statements will start going out, in which case the collector can then decide whether or not to come over here and set this up to hold it indefinitely or just not held at all and have the statements keep going out anyways. Now you'll learn about this in the other training videos, but again I want to focus on what the system default is for so you can get an idea if you want the collector to have that type of control in your system defaults. And that's setting it up to yes. If not, you can say it to no, and then the collector can't touch whether or not the patient gets statements or not. Preview patient billing default. Yes, if you want to preview the patient billing results in the patient billing wizard prior to processing. Gosh, 99% of the time, or I'd say 100% you'd want this. I'd like to view what's going out before I actually send it out or generate it to paper. So I'll leave that as yes. Reports. Day close mode. Standard or batch. This is covering two things. When you close your day, you can generate certain reports, and these reports, after you close your day, it resets them back to 0 so you can balance at the end of each day. Second note is that you cannot submit any claims or generate any of them if you don't close your day. So, do you want to do it by standard or batch? Standard will generate everything like payments or charges posted since last end of day close, where batch will give you an option to choose a date range when you close your end of day, but if you miss a date to close, then the claims for that date won't be released. So standard is going linear, day by day by day. day after day. Batch is like, well, I'll close January 1st, then I'll close January 5th. Whoops, I missed January 2nd through the 4th. Claims don't get submitted. So by default, most offices choose standard. Hash total digits, and these next three lines are all referring to hash. No, it's not something you smoke. What it's supposed to do is actually add up all your procedure codes for you in a report where you can get the total and be able to balance against all the procedure codes you post that day. For example, to keep it real simple, let's say we just had two procedure codes we posted today, a 99214 and a 99215. Hash is going to add up those two. So what's 99214 plus 99215? 198,429. Now, after you get the total, what you're supposed to do is compare this report against what you actually posted here, and if the totals are the same when you add up procedure codes, comparing this report and the other report, either from your charge slips or super bills, if you get the same total, then you know that you used the right procedure codes, your day's balanced. Not a lot of offices use this, but you're welcome to do it, and I'll explain it real quickly. Hash total digits. You can set up how many digits you want to have in your report. For example, let's take the procedure code 99214. If we say we just want 4 digits, then it will only go to 9921. If we want 5, it includes the full 99214. If we go 6, 7, and 8, then of course you're getting up there, and that will include the totals there. So you can go ahead and decide what you'd like. Include hash totals, batch trial. What that means, and you can watch a training video on opening your batches. A batch will keep track of all of the charges, payments, and write-offs you post while you're in the system, and it's just for you to balance. So that way, if you have 5 or 6 people posting charges and payments, they can have their own batch that they open that they can balance too. So in that batch, that report, do you want to be able to include your hash totals so you can balance to the charges that you posted that day? Yes or no? Include hash totals. Do you want that in the day close report? And as we just talked about, when you close your day, you do get a report. Do you want the totals there as well? Yes or no? One thing you want to note is that if an alpha code is found within the specified hash total digits, then the line item is not counted. So if you have a character in your codes, it won't count them. Now on to something simpler, numerically sequenced charge slips. In other words, if you have 10 or 15 charge slips you're printing off and you're not going paperless, do you want to be able to have them numbered at the bottom of the page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? Print provider name on the charge slips, yes or no? Preview the charge slip default. Do you want to preview the charge slip before you print them? Yes. Do you want to keep the diagnosis codes with the procedure codes on the charge slip? If you say no, it'll break them onto a second page, separating the ICD-9s and the CPT codes. Otherwise, you can have the top page procedure codes, the bottom page diagnosis codes. Of course, if you have more than 500, it's going to spill over anyways. In addition to everything that's going to be printing on the super bill anyways, like the appointment time, the patient's name, you can also set up to 4 additional fields here. Let me scroll down. And clicking on the drop down arrow, these are the only additional choices that you get. So go ahead and go through them, and you can say, well, I also want the financial class, and I'd like to include the responsible party's name, also their employer, and maybe their deductible. You don't have to choose any of these, you can leave them blank. How about your AR reports? What do you want the aging to be based upon? Service date, date of entry, or aging date? And it's broken down as such. Aging is set initially by the date of entry and updates to today's date when a payment is posted. So when they first post the charge, that's the beginning of your aging. The moment you make a payment, if you select aging here, then it's going to update it to that date that the payment was made. Next is entry date. If you choose that, entry is the initial date of entering charges. However, updates to today's date with any activity. That's not just payments, that's if you post another charge. So entry includes charges and payments, where aging date is just payments. And then the service date is the actual date of service performed or scheduled. Doesn't matter if you post payments, charges, anything, it's still that data service. Now keep in mind that when you generate these reports, you can change it on the fly. For example, let me pull up an AR report by going to Reports, Financial Totals, to the most popular one is the Analysis of Service Detail. And you can see here that the default is set to data service, and that's what my system default was. You also have aging, and some reports have aging here, and of course we also have date of entry. So in other words, again, these are system defaults. This isn't permanent stuff. It just means that the default is going to be data service. Well, that's one less thing I have to choose if I want the default there. Otherwise I can choose date of entry, generate it this one time, and then the default every time I reopen this report will be data service. So again, that's easily overwritten. Export format. When you export reports, do you want the default to be Excel as a TIFF image or a comma-separated value? Most offices enjoy Excel. Report viewer. How do you want to view the reports that you generate? Default most offices have is HTML, but you can also choose Adobe Acrobat PDF. Here, static fields just tells you basically when your last end of month was closed and your last end of year was closed. And you can see I'm behind here. July should have been closed, so I have to get on my billers about that. And also the last time I closed it was in 2005 for my end of year. In any case, these are for you to check on to make sure that the end of month and the end of year are closed each month and each year. Security.